Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Margaret Fox. I'm a writer here at Stratfor, and joining me today is Fred Burton, our Vice President of Intelligence, to talk to us a little bit about the jet that went down in Sinai on October 31st. So Fred, 244 people lost their lives in this crash. Have we seen plane crashes like this before?
These kinds of plane crashes I've seen my entire career, and it's not surprising to me that this occurred, but I think what I find very interesting is the target set as well as the location where this occurred, which shows, I think, a degree of means and opportunity that whoever was behind this had to be able to get to that specific airport and to that specific plane.
You mentioned someone being behind it, and there are still a host of theories about what caused the crash. Immediately after the crash, the Islamic State actually claimed responsibility. In your opinion, can we trust that claim, or was it something else, do you think, that caused the
I don't
accident?
think you can rule out that at this stage, and if you look at all the different media sources and some of the leaks that have been coming out of London and Washington, it appears that the working theory is that the Islamic State was behind this. But I think, curiously, it also shows a little bit of their capabilities as well as their constraints, in that if they could, they would have certainly targeted an American flag carrier or a British flag carrier, but they didn't. Now, was that probably because they couldn't? In all probability, yes.
You speak from experience. You've investigated flights crashing before. You've investigated terrorist attacks like this, if this is a terrorist attack. How do investigators go about that work? What are they looking for?
Well, it's pretty gruesome work. I know from looking at these kinds of crashes, such as the plane crash which killed President Zia of Pakistan, you have to really get down into the details on the crime scene, meaning you have to have good evidence recovery. You have to make sure you do thorough autopsies. You literally are looking for fragments that may have been embedded in some of the bodies that were recovered from the scene, looking for explosive evidence.
And you're always working with a different amount of evidence, right?
You always are. And remember, too, you're dealing at times with chain of custody problems with evidence. You have evidence that's scattered at times over large pieces of geography. And then you have chain of custody with recovery as to whether or not this actually came from the crime scene. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts work that's very detailed that takes place behind the scenes. And then when you're dealing with an event like this that's very international, you have so many different cooks in the kitchen and everybody trying to get involved.
Right.
It becomes political at times as to who is going to do some basic work, such as how are the autopsies going to be done? Who's going to process the evidence? And where's that evidence going to go?
In this case, though, we actually have access to quite a bit of the wreckage, right? It went down over an area that was not particularly populous.
Or over water, which is also a challenge.
Oh, right. And in this case, at least we're on land. And actually, I believe they've recovered the black box from the flight as well. Will that help in the investigation?
That will help, but it's been my experience in those kinds of cases, what you'll see, you'll not have, you'll be able to rule out, for example, catastrophic mechanical from the black box, but in essence what you'll have is just signals and flashes all of a sudden going off, which indicates some sort of catastrophic event at a specific altitude. So then you get back into, well, what could this have been? And there's really only two options. It was either a catastrophic mechanical or an improvised explosive device. And then when you're dealing with an improvised explosive device, was this a timed device or a barometric device?
Now, you actually recently wrote a piece on this, and you discussed that the how in this instance is more important than the why. It's more important than the motive. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? It might have something to do with what you just said about the barometer device.
Sure. When you're looking at, from a counterterrorism perspective, the protection of commercial aviation, how this occurred is very critical for the counterterrorism forces of all governments to know, so they can kind of look at it from a lessons learned.
I see.
How was that device placed onto the plane? Was there an insider on the ground that helped secrete that onto that commercial flight? Was it placed onto the flight with part of the ground crew? So in essence, the modus operandi of the how is very important to prevent additional planes from falling out of the sky.
I see. So we're all kind of talking about who did it, but really we should be focusing on the method because that's how we can prevent future events.
In my assessment, yes. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it's very important to figure out who was behind this, hunt those people down, either in a kill-capture kind of scenario. But in reality, in order to prevent other attacks like this from occurring, how that device got onto the aircraft is very critical to figure out at this juncture.
Certainly is. And well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I know we're all eagerly awaiting the final results of the investigation.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. For more on this and other topics, please do visit our website at stratfor.com.